If our children are the seeds and we are their gardeners, how we plant them and the way we tend to them will determine if they reach their full bloom. So we choose to listen to our intuition, focus on connection, and stay deeply rooted in order to make the most of every season in motherhood. We don't have all the answers, and we probably never will. We are learning as they grow. This is our journey, and by sharing our truths, we hope to encourage anyone along the way. Welcome to the Learning as They Grow podcast. Hi, welcome back to this week's episode of Learning as They Grow. I'm your host, Alicia Foster. Today, we're going to be diving into sun exposure and sunscreen. It is summertime and I am here in Texas, so we are in the heat of summer already. And it's a really important topic to think about, especially as a parent. It's something that, I grew up just not worrying about it much. I was covered in sunscreen. My parents protected me from the sun. But I also had very fair skin and I burned all the time despite being covered in sunscreen. And I have millions of freckles, and my husband is the same way. And so now that we've had our daughter, she is very fair skinned too. And we're just trying to find the best way to protect her. So I kind of went into a rabbit hole. I started learning more about sun exposure. Is it as scary as, everyone wants to portray it? Of course, we all know it can cause skin cancer. Yes, that is known. However, are there benefits to it? So I dove into it. Is the risk worse than the benefits, or is it harder to get your benefits if you're constantly being afraid of the risk? So I looked into that, and then I looked into sunscreens, because if we're so afraid of the sun, I've got to protect myself and my child from it. How am I going to do that? Sunscreens. But what if the things that we're putting on our body are actually just as harmful, if not more, than the thing that we're trying to protect our skins from? So I started looking into it, and I came to a lot of new learnings, new findings. This is going to be, I'm going to break this down into 4 main points. I'm going to talk first about sun exposure and the benefits of it. We all know the risks of it, and definitely too much of a good thing is not a good thing. So I think that that is very true for the sun. But let's talk about the good side of the sun, because everybody talks about the bad side of the sun. That's known. And then I'm going to break it down into the other part, which is going to be about sunscreen, the risks of sunscreen, and finding ways that you can make better choices when it comes to sunscreen or protecting yourself from the sun. All right, so let's get started talking about sunlight, sun exposure. So the first point I think is so important to address is that exposure to sunlight is needed. It is beneficial. So if you go online and literally just search, do I need the sun, or is the sun needed? You will come to the conclusion that sunlight is essential for human health. It goes into all of the benefits. It is obviously helpful. Everyone knows that it helps you produce vitamin D, but there's also benefits of supporting bone health, lowering your blood pressure, preventing disease, promoting good mental health. I think that is huge, especially after the coronavirus and all of that craziness. A lot of people put themselves inside. They were afraid to go outside, and suicide rates skyrocketed. Not only is the isolation and just being alone a big factor, but not being exposed to sunlight, not getting outside, all of that really affected people's mental health. So that is huge. And it is, as a parent, I've got to say, sunlight is also so beneficial for your child's and adults' circadian rhythm. So this was something that I knew prior to having a child, but didn't really think about how important that was to apply to my child once I had her, until my first meeting with our pediatrician. We just love our pediatrician. We couldn't have asked for a better blessing of a pediatrician. She comes to us, she sits with us for 2 hours, really takes the time to get to know our daughter, and she's more of a holistic pediatrician with a full medical degree and all of that great stuff. But she is very big on understanding how our body works rather than just constantly curing things with medicine and stuff like that. So one of the very first things she told me is like, make sure during the daytime, your blinds are open, your child and you can go outside for a couple of minutes to 10, 15 minutes a day, at least, to make sure that her circadian rhythm is syncing and understanding that this is daytime. This is when I'm going to be awake more than nighttime. Obviously, there's naps that need to happen in the beginning that are constant, every 30 minutes, 45 minutes, they're napping, but understanding that this is a time when I am awake most of the time. And then when it's dark, this is when I'm going to try to sleep and hopefully eventually sleep through the night. So that was a big one for me as a parent too. Like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, sunlight exposure is needed every day. There's so many benefits to it. In addition to that, it's important to think about the second point that I'm going to talk about that I think so many people don't realize 50% of our population is suffering from vitamin D deficiency. So I was a teacher, as I've stated before in my previous episodes, and fortunately I was at a school and I got a classroom that had windows in the classroom. So I had a big, beautiful window. I got to look outside, but I had friends and coworkers who were in classrooms with no windows at all, just that horrible, like school, hospital type lighting. And that there's a lot of stuff with that I don't love those lights for different reasons, but the fact that they were inside of this box 8 hours of a day, and a lot of them only got outside if it was for recess time, which some of them chose to not do recess duty. Instead, they do lunch duty. And so they were literally inside for the entire 8 hours of the day, and they were suffering from vitamin D deficiency. So interesting. Well, they're not getting the proper exposure to sunlight. So if you look into vitamin D deficiency, the NIH, the National Institute of Health, as I've talked many times about this being a great source if you ever want to have scientific articles that are factual, they're data driven, and people can actually understand and stand behind what you're saying, because they say, okay, wow, this has actually been tested. A lot of times people want to give you a hard time and say, oh, where'd you hear that on the internet? Well, yeah, the internet is our new library. You just have to make sure that you're deciphering between different sources. And the NIH is a source that people can say, okay, these things have been tested, they've been proven, these are the conclusions that they have come to with data and science. So NIH is a huge source that I try to use. Even if I don't agree with everything on there, I think it is helpful to, like I said, use to share with other people things, and it kind of gives you a better leg to stand on. So the NIH stated vitamin D insufficiency affects almost 50% of the population worldwide. An estimated 1 billion people worldwide across all ethnicities and all age groups have a vitamin D deficiency. The pandemic of this vitamin D deficiency can mainly be attributed to lifestyle. For example, reduced outdoor activities, and environmental, for example, air pollution, factors that reduce exposure to sunlight, which is required for ultraviolet B, so the UVB, induced vitamin D production in the skin. Current studies suggest that we may need more vitamin D than presently recommended to prevent chronic disease. That's huge. There's a lot that we can unfold in there. One of the biggest parts that is very obvious is that we may need more vitamin D than presently recommended to prevent chronic disease. So you can easily search how much sunlight is recommended per day. And what I've found is that 10 to 15 minutes is recommended in the summertime of direct sunlight. That is not you covered up or in the shade or having sunscreen on. That is you completely just outside soaking up the sun. That's during the summertime. During the winter time, 2 hours is recommended of direct sunlight. 2 hours. Most people don't get that at all. So the wintertime is a very hard time to get the sun that is recommended. But this is saying that we may need more than is presently recommended. So for me, 10 to 15 minutes is not enough for us to get outside and have direct sunlight. I try to lean more towards at least 30 minutes, but that's what works for me. And it says that it's going to help prevent chronic disease, among all the other things. We talked about how it helps with lowering blood pressure, supporting bone health, good mental health. So yeah, being outside, being in sunlight for at least the recommended time is going to be so beneficial. The other part I wanted to point out in that NIH article is that it talks about sun exposure being required for the UVB induced vitamin D production. Okay, so I think I know that there are supplements that people take often, and a lot of times people get on medication if they have a vitamin D deficiency. Some people take supplements just regularly to make sure that they have enough vitamin D, especially if you're a new mom and you're nursing. I know, I don't quote me on this, but I think it was around 9 months that the pediatrician said that my vitamin D was no longer going to be sufficient to supply for myself and my child. So it would be helpful to take some sort of vitamin D supplement as well. So there's that, but think about the fact that vitamin D is naturally occurring in you. You just need something to induce it and activate it, and that is the sun. That is the UVB rays that we're receiving from the sun. And I think so often people are so afraid of getting too much of the UV rays, and you can look into it. There's a whole split on there's UVA rays and UVB rays. UVA rays are the ones that might cause skin cancer and aging, but the UVB help your body produce that vitamin D. And again, I briefly dove into this, so don't quote me on everything I'm saying here. I'm learning as they grow, like I stand by. I'm just trying to learn as much as I can in a short time. Like summer is here. We're getting outside. I need to know how to protect my child from getting too much sun, but also from the risk of putting chemicals on her to protect her from something that we might actually need. So that's my next part I'm going to dive into. Okay, so it's very clear. Sun is needed. Too much of it can be harmful. But how do we know how to protect ourselves from too much of it? We like to go outside often. We are constantly going to places for more than the recommended time of being outside. We like to go to the zoo. We like to go to the beach, to the lake, to the river, and we're going to be outside for a good amount of time. So how am I going to protect my body and my daughter's body and my whole family as a whole from getting too much of that great thing, the sun? So most people say, duh, sunscreen. Cover yourself, lather yourself. That's how we grew up. Spray it on, bring your bottles and just keep spraying and you'll be good. Not true. So like I said, I grew up actually burning a lot as a child, despite the layers and layers we put on. There is a lot of information out there that is discussing that our body, the chemicals in the sunscreen is actually oxidizing once it's exposed to the oxygen in the sun, and it actually has a reverse effect. So that's a big problem. I did not dive too much into that because I just briefly heard that right before doing this, and I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. But the parts I am going to dive into, the next 2 points I have, is that many sunscreen ingredients have been linked to causing cancer as well. Everyone's so afraid of the cancer that sun can cause, but the sunscreens are also proven to cause cancer, hormone disruption, allergies, and many other concerns. So I'm going to start with that one, and then I'll get into the next one of alternative ways to protect yourself from sun. Okay, so we know that the sun, too much of it, can cause cancer. But whenever you hear now that sunscreen causes cancer too, and for me, a big one, especially having a daughter, is the hormone disruptions. That is a huge issue with women nowadays. And you see girls who are younger and younger looking more and more mature physically and going through periods at 8, 9 years old. That is a lot to do with hormone disruptors. So that's a big thing for me too. Obviously, cancer is huge as well. So when I hear this, I'm like, oh my goodness, can I protect my daughter from anything? Like, don't have her out in the sun too much, but don't cover her in this stuff because this can also cause bad things. So this is kind of what started my rabbit hole. I was like, there's gotta be a way. I need to figure out how to protect her. I'm not gonna be afraid of the sun and hide inside all the time. Like, we're gonna be out, we're gonna be active. That's who we were when it was just my husband and I. That's who we are now as parents. And our daughter is our newest little adventure buddy, and she's just loving being outside. That's actually her favorite place since she was little bitty. When we needed to calm her, nothing else helped. All we had to do was step outside for a second, and it was just like the breeze, the sunlight, probably everything just slowly calmed her down. And I've heard that from many families who are also in nature often. They say that's their favorite place for their children to be of all ages. So we're going to be in it. How do I protect her? So I started looking at the chemical ingredients that were in sunscreen. And it is probably more known now. If you start searching this, people all over have been talking about this for the last 5-10 years or so. And people are becoming more and more aware of it. And so that's good. But I know there's some people who aren't aware of it. So the purpose of my podcast is not to tell you what you're putting on your child's body is bad. No, put on your child's body what you feel is best for your child's body. If you're more afraid of the sun exposure because of those risks, by all means, do you. But this is me trying to share what I've learned for those who either don't know and have never heard of any of this, or didn't realize just how high the risk is. They might say, yeah, there's a little risk with that, but this one's higher. So I'm just going to share what I learned. Okay, so the ingredients that are found in most of the sunscreens, you can look at a list. I'm not going to try to pronounce all of them. Most of them have stuff like benzene, benzone, oxy, octo. There's a bunch of, they have chemical names, right? I'm looking at the list right now. I'll actually pull up the list. Let's do that. I'll do a screen share. So if you are not watching the YouTube version of this podcast right now, go check it out. Or I will actually post my blog that has this chart that I'm about to share with all of the ingredients. And I'll post that in the show notes. So you can go and check that out too. And I will try to pronounce some of these. Okay, so active ingredients, let's start here. So some of the chemical ingredients, like I said, oxybenzone, octinoxate, I'm definitely not pronouncing that right, homosalate, octisalate, blah, blah, blah. If you can read, you can see that. And we're going to dive into what this chart says in just a second. But before we do, I want to address a certain point that was brought to my attention when I started looking into this. So I didn't know that many tourist places, such as Hawaii, the Virgin Islands, Key West, and there's a couple other ones that I hadn't heard of before, banned the use of sunscreens with certain chemicals and the sale of these sunscreens, oxybenzone and octinoxate. I know I'm not right. Due to these ingredients, here's what they say. They can contribute to the bleaching and the poisoning of the coral reefs. The bleaching and the poisoning of the coral reefs. If that's what it's doing to the coral reefs, what on earth is it doing to our body? If you look into it again, FDA says that the sunscreen ingredients absorb through our skin and it ends up in our blood. And it also ends up in our breast milk as nursing mothers at high levels, not just that, oh yeah, a little bit can get in there, but at high levels. The FDA also states that long-term exposure to benzene is known to cause cancer in humans. Hey, so again, there is your proof that it actually does cause cancer. And if it's bleaching and poisoning the coral reefs, think about what it's doing to our skin, our baby's skin. And you might be fine right now. They might be fine when they're 10. They might be fine when they're 20. But then we wonder why there's so many chronic illnesses going on. Why are people suffering from multitude of things that we had never heard of, or why is everybody and their mom on pain medicine for different things going on in their body, blood pressure medicine, and just constantly fighting these illnesses. Well, let's look at what we've been putting on and in our body from an early age and continue to do for a lifetime. So that was huge to me. Okay, so I'm going to get back onto the chart, and this chart is going to break down. In 2019, the FDA proposed to classify what sunscreen ingredients were deemed as what they call GRACE, which is generally recognized as safe and effective. So safe and effective ingredients. They stated that the ingredients PABA and I'm not going to pronounce this right, trolaminsalicate, I will show you on my screen. Okay, so this was the word, this is the word I was trying to say that I most definitely cannot say, but that along with the PABA were no longer generally recognized as safe. So if you see any sunscreens with these two ingredients, they're just straight up not safe by the FDA. In addition to that, 2 ingredients out of the 6 other ones listed below, in addition to those 2 ingredients, sorry, the PABA and this trolaminsalicate or whatever, 6 other ingredients that I have listed below here were no longer classified as safe and effective, or as they stated, I'll pull up this other screen share in just a minute. They actually stated as they need further review on the other ingredients. So, okay, looking at the chemicals. So oxybenzone, which is in a lot of the sunscreens that you'll get over the counter, no longer classified as safe and effective. This oxinoxate, no longer. Homosalate, octisalate, octocrylene, avobenzone. All of these are just on this list, not they're working on making them safe and effective. So it's, sorry, I misspoke earlier. It's not that they're saying they are not safe and effective. The only 2 that they for sure say are not safe and effective are this PABA and the trolaminsalicate, but all the other ones that I just listed, along with other ones that are not even on this list, they're proposing that they need to be classified as safe and effective with certain regulations in place. That might be a better way to explain it. So let's look at what I was saying I would share here in a second. This is going to be directly from the FDA. This is how they word it. And let me pull it up. Okay. So this is from FDA.gov is the source here. This was just a quick breakdown of the 2019 proposal where they were trying to make regulation changes on sunscreen. So it says that the first thing that I was discussing is the remaining 12 ingredients, and here's a list of a bunch of other things I can't pronounce. Some of those are on that list that I was showing earlier, the homosalate, the octinoxate, the octisalate, all the octos, all the benzones, all of that stuff. Anything that sounds like a chemical, the 12 ingredients, they say that they need more safety information for those, okay? So again, the only 2 they're technically saying are not safe and effective are the PABA and the trimine. I should have practiced pronouncing these beforehand. Sorry, y'all might be laughing at me, but you also might be seeing how crazy it is to try to read certain things and get more information. And it really is set up, I forget the word that it is set up to make you feel dumb. Like, this isn't for you. This is for scientists and doctors to talk about. If you can't pronounce these, like, probably shouldn't be reading this. Is kind of how the system is set up to make you feel. But I'm going to sit here and I'm going to try to pronounce stuff and I'm going to totally say it wrong. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, I could say the blah, blah, blah 1 and the blah, blah, blah 2 are not safe and effective. That's all that matters. If I can remember some of these words just by a visual memory and know that when I look at ingredients, I do not want these on my sunscreen, that's all that matters. I don't have to pronounce them perfectly. If you're laughing at me for pronouncing them badly, by all means, I'm laughing at myself too. Okay, so again, this is directly from the FDA. They are stating that those 12 remaining ingredients, in addition to the 2 up there, we're needing some regulations put in place. So what is safe and effective if none of those are good? What is safe and effective? So they came to the conclusion that 2 ingredients, zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, are proposed to be safe and effective. And so if you look back at this chart that I have here, it shows that those are the 2, the titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. Those are natural occurring minerals. That's one reason it's a little easier to say them. And we also grew up talking about minerals and all of that with the periodic table. I'm not great at science. So those words are a little bit easier to pronounce. They're more familiar. You probably know where they come from, like all of that stuff. And for me, that is a good key for ever finding safe and effective ingredients, is if I can't pronounce it, if I'm struggling to pronounce it, or I don't know where it came from, if it was created in a lab, probably not going to be something that I want inside of my body. So the titanium dioxide and zinc oxide have been classified as being proposed as safe and effective as of 2019. Now, there is argument that the titanium dioxide it is a carcinogen. It can cause cancer. But that, if you look more into it, is if you inhale it. So don't use the powder of sunscreens, which I didn't even know powder sunscreen was a thing, but powder sunscreen, you can easily inhale stuff, but also the sprays. That's a big one that you want to avoid, because inhaling the titanium dioxide can cause cancer just as well as all of those chemicals, but inhaling the chemicals can also cause cancer. So that is one thing to point out. People will say, oh, well, that's a carcinogen. Well, if you're using a cream or a lotion sunscreen, you're not having the risk of inhaling those minerals. And also if you saw on that chart that I had pulled up, again, this will all be in the show notes. You can go back and look at it. But all of the chemicals, they do penetrate the skin, where the titanium dioxide and the zinc oxide, the FDA states that those 2 have, let me find the exact quote. It says that evidence suggests that few, if any, zinc or titanium particles penetrate the skin to reach living tissue. Therefore, if it is a carcinogen, it's not going to be going into your body, getting into your blood, getting into your breast milk that you're giving to your baby. So those are things that you can put on topically without the risk of carcinogen, without the risk of cancer. Okay, so let's get into the zinc oxide and the titanium dioxide and what kind of things you can look for with that. So people might know about this already. I know mineral sunscreens have been around for a long time, and it's becoming more and more popular to try to get the natural or the organic ones or things like that. But for me and my family, we currently are only sticking to stuff that only has zinc oxide, because there are a lot of other mineral sunscreens and natural claimed ones that have other ingredients that are also not good for you. So look out for that. If you're interested in diving more into that, go on ahead. I haven't done a deep dive, but I've been told that seed oils are something that you want to avoid, like sunflower oil, or I don't know if avocado oil, I would think it is because it is a seed, but don't quote me on that. Again, this is not something I've looked too much into. I've got a limited time with a 16-month-old, and I'm just looking into everything that is important to me and sharing with y'all. So we found what works for us is zinc oxide. So that is the only ingredient that I am using for sunscreen. And this brings me to my next point. I'm not always using sunscreen because sunscreen is not always needed. So I know some people who, if they're going for a walk around the block, they're going to put sunscreen on their kid. Again, do you, whatever you feel comfortable with. I'm sharing my experience and why we're choosing to do or not do certain things. So as I stated previously, we are always outside. I go outside at least 15 minutes every single day with her. It's probably more 30 minutes now because we started spending our mornings out back. We sit on the deck and she likes to play, and I'm trying to work on doing some journaling and reflecting and Bible study time. So we start our day with being outside, and then we always go somewhere like a walk or a bike ride or a park, zoo, splash pad, whatever it may be. We're always outside. So I'm not always putting sunscreen on her, and it's important to understand why that is and how she has yet to have like a sunburn or anything, knock on wood, because we were just in the start of summer. But I've noticed that we can be outside for quite some time and I haven't seen her skin burning in the way that me and my husband's skin has always burned. Instead, she's getting a little bit of color, a little bit of tan to her. And so that to me kind of is like, her skin is not reacting negatively to this stuff. Instead, it's getting the vitamin D that it needs, and it's like glowing right now. So that's how I see it. So for us, on days that we're going to be in direct sunlight for less than an hour, I skip the sunscreen. I take breaks in the shade and stuff like that. But on days when we're going to be in direct sunlight for an hour or more, or majority of the day, I will bring the sunscreen, and then I let her get that first recommended amount, as I talked about earlier, the 10 to 20 minutes or the 2 hours in the winter. So I never bring sunscreen in the winter time, but during the summertime, I let her get that recommended amount so that her body can just naturally soak in that sun and produce that vitamin D that she's needing. And then I will apply the sunscreen if it's needed. I take a lot of breaks in the shade. We always try to find a park that is covered or has a lot of trees. We post up under the trees. I bring water, obviously, to make sure she's hydrated, and a little fan is always in the back of my car just to make sure that there is no risk of heat, overheating. So those things are not an issue for us. But when it comes to if we're going to be somewhere where there isn't shade and she is needing to be protected for longer, it's important to note that those mineral sunscreens don't last as long. So it is something that you might have to apply more frequently. Like I said, I wait in the beginning to let her get that little bit that she needs, and then I'll apply it. And I also make sure that she always has a hat covering her adorable little face. And she's blonde, almost bald still. She's got a lot of blonde hair, but you can see straight through to her scalp. So if I didn't have a hat on, I would have to cover her head in sunscreen because it's going to burn if not. And then she is in a long sleeve bathing suit. I never thought that I'd have that kid that's all covered up, but it's totally beneficial, and I see why. I look at her though, and I'm like, she's adorable. I'll share a quick picture of what she looks like in her regular like summer get up. This is how she's looking. She's always got some sort of hat, and they make hats now that like they say are UV protected or whatever it may be. And then I have her in a long sleeve bathing suit. Her legs are exposed. So by the time that I do decide to put on some sunscreen, I mostly put it on her legs and then sometimes put it on her little hands. And that's it. I don't even need to put it on her face because I usually just try to face her the opposite way to where she's not looking directly in the sun. Her hat is shading her face. And that's the only parts of her little body that's getting sun exposure. So far, we haven't had any issues, and we've been going in the sun, doing a lot of things since last season, since she was little bitty and couldn't walk. We still were getting outside a lot. So yeah, that's kind of how we do it. Shade, long sleeves, hats, and bringing the sunscreen, using it when it's necessary, sticking to sunscreens that are mineral based, only having ingredients that are naturally found in the earth, and trying to just do what we feel is best for her. So that's kind of my spiel on sun exposure and sunscreen. I hope you learned something today. Take it, leave it, whatever is best for your family. I say go ahead and do. Now, I will say, if you're interested in diving into this, do your own research, please, by all means. I am not an expert. I am just a mom, a new mom, trying to learn as my child is growing up and make choices for her that are educated and informed, and just knowing all of my facts before I just go with the flow. And so that's what I do. I research, and it is very important to discern through your research, because you have to understand a lot of these big corporations are actually sponsored by certain corporations that include all the bad things, like Coca-Cola, or they're sponsored by Banana Boat. So of course they're going to act like sunscreen's great. You need to make sure you put sunscreen on. Well, they want to sell their product. So make sure that you discern, look into where you're getting your facts from, make sure that it is aligned with, or the people that are creating it, whether it's an article or I just drew a blank. Mom brain is real. Whatever it is, just make sure that the people creating it are aligned with your beliefs. And you can find a lot out there. You might have to skip the first couple Google searches that come up, because they're going to be pushing their agenda for certain things. So do your own research, look into it. I hope that this episode serves you well and it benefits you. If you have any questions, if I misspoke on certain things and you're like, you need to do more research on this, please reach out to me. I'm always here to learn. I am happy to admit when I'm wrong, but I hope again that y'all have an excellent summer and stay safe, stay outside having fun, soaking up that good vitamin D, and stay burn-free, chemical-free, whatever it may be. All right, I'm Alicia Foster, and I will see you next week.